Have you ever wanted to use an authentic resource like a menu or a meme or a social media post, but thought, my students aren't ready for this, they'll never understand it? Well, actually, I would argue that they are ready for it and they will understand it. In this episode, I'll show you how to use authentic text at every proficiency level, even absolute novices. I'll share practical suggestions for selecting and scaffolding activities that support student engagement with authentic resources. So, let's jump in. Whether you're planning your first lesson or celebrating your 20th year in the language classroom, I understand exactly where you are. I'm Joshua Cabral, and I'm also a language teacher in my 29th year of teaching. Now, I also have the opportunity to support schools and teachers all across the country who are working towards increasing proficiency and building confidence in their students. This is the World Language Classroom Podcast, with over 200 episodes of practical strategies tested in real classrooms just like yours and mine. So let's jump in. Vamos, allons-y. Hello, my friends. Bonjour, mes amis. Hola, mis amigos. Welcome to the World Language Classroom Podcast. I am Joshua Cabral, and thank you, as always, for hanging out with me and spending time listening to a podcast about language teaching. I have so much respect for you as a language teacher, wanting to go deeper and to be thinking introspectively about what happens in your classroom and about your teaching in general. So thank you so much for being with me here. So we are talking about authentic resources today, and this is a hot topic when we talk about our comprehensible input-based classrooms, our CI classrooms, and our communicative classrooms and cultural competence, that we want to make sure that we are bringing in that authenticity into the student learning environment, to their learning experience, so that they are getting all of those cultural nuances, to see that the language exists in a cultural space and dynamic, so that they are having access to that, so that when they are out there and in a target language cultural community, that they're able to engage with these documents and have a level of comfort and confidence and understanding what they need to get from reading them when they're in those situations. So it starts by making sure that in our classroom that we are scaffolding and supporting their engagement with these documents so that they are able to, in a real world proficiency situation, navigate them and get the information that they need as they are getting around in a city, or trying to figure out what to order on a menu, or read the directions about how to use the elevator, whatever that is, or find how to get to the pharmacy, whatever those things are. When they are in that authentic situation, that they are confident in engaging with these authentic documents and understanding how the culture is embedded within them. So these authentic resources in our classrooms are incredibly valuable. Whether it is an Instagram post, whether it is a cafe menu from Buenos Aires, it is a flyer for a festival, say in Senegal, you might think that when you see these, oh, this is excellent, this is pure gold, this would be so great, this is what language learning is really about, and it's exciting. But then you might pause and you think, oh, can my students actually handle this? I find it really interesting and I think it would be great for them, but can we do this in the target language, or will I have to do it in English? So especially my novices, won't they be overwhelmed? These are the questions that come up when we find these authentic resources. So if you've ever hesitated to use authentic materials, or in general use them, but maybe specific ones because you thought that your students weren't quote unquote ready, hopefully this episode will help to shift your thinking a bit by giving you some tools and strategies to bring these documents into your classroom regardless of the level that you're teaching. So as we start with this topic, I just like to put this idea out there, and it's that authentic resources are not the reward for reaching proficiency, but they're the pathway to proficiency. Now, when we say this, it's the idea that when students are ready to engage, they've done all this work, now they have the language and the understanding, and they can engage with this authentic resource. That's what I mean by it's sort of the reward. It's what they get to at the end. But rather than that, I would suggest that they are actually a pathway to get to that proficiency level. That the more they are seeing them and engaging with them, the more confidence they are getting. Now, this all comes down to how we're having them engage. If you are having a novice level student engage in an authentic resource where they need an intermediate, mid to high to advanced proficiency level, that's not going to be motivating, and that's not a pathway to proficiency. But by having novice level students engage in a novice way, or intermediate mid-level students engage in an intermediate mid-level way, then that is what's going to make it a pathway to proficiency. And part of that pathway there is building that confidence that they don't have to avoid those signs when they see them, because there's no way they're going to understand it, but you've actually shown them in your classroom that they are able to understand and pull information from it that they truly do understand. So that is how we are using this idea of authentic resources not being the reward or what needs to come only after reaching this particular level of proficiency, but it's that pathway to get there. And that pathway is building the confidence that they can actually engage. So the key to all of this is how we select and scaffold those resources in our classroom. You don't have to wait until students understand every word in the authentic resource. In fact, they shouldn't understand every word in there, because interpretive communication is about what they will understand in a real-world context. This is such an essential skill. And it is likely that when they are out there in that real world context, they're not going to understand every single word. So by providing these opportunities in our classrooms where students can see that they can pull information even if they don't understand every single word on there, that performance situation is setting them up for that proficiency situation in the real world where they can say, okay, I can look at this document, I can read this sign, and I can pull out the information I need without understanding everything. If we only provide opportunities with authentic documents in our classroom where students understand every single word, then they go out in the real world and they're not understanding anything because it's always way more complex than you've shown them in the classroom. We're not setting them up for success. So we want to show them that they, at their proficiency level, can pull information from authentic text. So we're going to look at some strategies that you can do right away, beginning tomorrow, this afternoon, if you're riding to school right now listening to this, without reworking your entire curriculum. So the first strategy is this idea of adjusting the task and not the text. And this is a Leslie Grand concept that I've heard from her. And let's say that you have a real menu from a cafe in France. And at first glance, it might seem overwhelming for a novice learner. Lots of unknown words, complex formatting, there might even be some slang on there. So here's what we mean by adjust the task, not the text, is you don't need to change the text, the menu. You change what you're asking students to do with it. So have students engage at their proficiency level. So for novice low students, so these would be students that are very new to the language, they are working with a text type of 1 to 2 words, so you can ask them, can you find a drink on the menu? So they're looking for one word, or maybe they actually understand 5 or 6 drink words, but they're choosing one. And then, can you tell me if this item is breakfast or lunch? So they can look through and maybe they will understand the words for breakfast and lunch and dinner. So they look for the food that you mentioned in your example, and they can see if it's under the heading of breakfast or lunch or dinner or something like that. Or you could ask them, can you find a word that looks like a cognate, that looks like a word in English if they're a native English speaker, or whatever language that is their native language? Can you find a cognate or a word that looks similar? So you can see with all of these novice low tasks, you're using an authentic document, but you're having them engage at their proficiency level, which is this 1 to 2 word stage. Then for novice high, where they are working with multiple chunked memorized phrases, a lot more language than just single words and phrases, you could ask them, what would you order for breakfast? And they could say, I would like, or I order, which would be some memorized phrases. How much would it cost? They likely have some numbers now, so they can say that something costs and use their numbers to say what that price would be. And then you could say, would this cafe be good for someone who doesn't eat meat? So they might just look at it and be recognizing that there are a number of meals and descriptions where they are seeing the ingredients and they're not seeing meat listed. So they can say, oh yes, there are many options for a vegetarian at this restaurant. So that requires more vocabulary, but they're able to navigate it at their proficiency level. So the text stays the same, but the task matches what learners can do. That's how you make an authentic resource accessible and meaningful for students. And so once they're able to look at it, even as those novice low, and they can pull out the drinks that they would like or the dessert they would like, then when they're in possibly France or Quebec City or wherever they are, and they open up a menu, they're not going to open it with fear that I don't understand anything on here, because you've already given them that experience that even at their proficiency level, they're able to pull information they need to navigate this situation. So the next strategy is to use visual context and what I will call chunking. So another way to support students is to lean into texts that include visuals, labels, and a structure to them, particularly earlier on, and then to break it into manageable chunks. So that's what I say, chunking. So take a school schedule in Spain, for example. So don't give the entire image and ask open-ended questions right away. Instead, zoom in on just the top section. Focus on the times of the day. Then move on to the subjects, and then ask students to compare that schedule to their own. Because as you go through it, they might realize that the times are written differently, or the idea of what lunch is looks different than on their schedule, or the timing of the day. So understanding everything at once is where it can become overwhelming. Whereas if you zoom in on sections that they can just focus on, so that they can understand just them and then connect it to the other sections as you're going through. So that's what I refer to as chunking. And this is a skill that they can then use out in the real world when they're looking at a entire schedule for something, or they're at the train station, or they're at the airport or something. It's, let me look at the sections where I'm sure I'm going to understand, and then I'll look for the other information from there. So what you're essentially doing here is you're creating mini input moments that feel doable and not overwhelming. And students are getting repeated and very purposeful exposure to this authentic language that is truly put into a context for them. So I think those two strategies are a really great starting point for you to go back into your classroom and look at adjusting the task and not the text so that students are able to engage at their proficiency level. And you're using this as a pathway to proficiency, and that pathway means building confidence that they can, at their proficiency level, pull out information even from a text where they don't understand all the words, and then using the visual context and the chunking so that students are able to look at the various sections more closely rather than everything at once where it can feel overwhelming. So if you take those two strategies into your classroom, I am sure you're going to find lots of success with your students and you're going to start to build their confidence. But if you would like to go a little deeper on this topic, I would recommend my Quick Win PD course for teachers, which is entitled Use Authentic Documents at Every Proficiency Level. So in these Quick Win courses, they are for individual teachers just like you that want to go a little deeper. So in just 30 minutes, you'll learn to distinguish what makes a text truly authentic and how to choose the right one for your level, and then how to design interpretive and communicative tasks that are aligned with your particular proficiency goals, and then how to use the planning template that helps you to integrate authentic resources into any unit. So in these courses, you get a full audio walkthrough where I walk you through all of the explanation of it, as well as the examples. So it's perfect. You can listen during your prep time. The audio is usually about 20 minutes, and then you could listen on your commute as well, kind of like listen to a podcast. But then in addition to that, I also provide you with very detailed notes that you can follow along as you're listening, or you can refer to later. And then there's a personal reflection task to take back to your classroom and your students, and then specific detailed examples at the novice, intermediate, and advanced level. And then you have your planning template that you can use use again and again. And then there is the opportunity to get a personalized certificate of completion to document your PD. So if you want to go deeper on these, the 30-minute quick win PD on using authentic resources at any level could be right up your alley. So the link is in the show notes, or you can go to my website, wlclassroom.com/authenticdocs. So wlclassroom.com/authenticdocs, or the link is also in the show notes. So for this week, I would like you to find one authentic resource. You may already have a bunch that you're using already, whether that be a menu, a social media post, a sign, song lyrics even, and then ask yourself, what can my students do with this document at their current proficiency level? What questions can you ask that build their confidence in interpreting real-world language? And then use it with your students, even just one task, one resource, that moment where your students can see that they can understand real-world language in a real-world context, but at their proficiency level. So don't ask them to engage at a much higher proficiency level that is going to be overwhelming for them. So it's at their proficiency level. And remember that you don't need to wait until students are ready or have earned it. Show them so that when they go out in the real world that they can pull out details and understand it with their proficiency level. Because they've had that experience in your classroom, they will then translate that into their confidence in engaging in the real world. Thank you for all that you do on a daily basis to support and motivate your students. I very much appreciate and enjoy supporting you and all of your language teacher colleagues as you bring effective, proficiency-focused strategies into your classroom. So just a quick reminder that I provide on-site workshops, live virtual sessions, self-paced department PD, and my new Ready for Tomorrow Quick Win courses for individual teachers. You can find the links for all of that in the show notes or on my website, wlclassroom.com. I will talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And let's stay connected on social media. You can find me at WL Classroom pretty much everywhere. You'll also find lots of ideas, suggestions, and resources on my website, wlclassroom.com. Now stay curious, keep learning, and continue the great work you do inspiring and supporting your students.